Buddhist practice always begins with taking refuge. There's a refuge chant that begins practice sessions. Uh, there are refuge vows that mark sort of the first step commitment as a practitioner, that you will take refuge in the teacher, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Right? The, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the three jewels in one, in the tradition that I practice. We have the fourth, we include the teacher in there, but the concept is exactly the same. You take refuge in these practices, in these teachings. So I want to talk today a little bit about what does refuge mean, not just within that sort of formal chant, prayer, vow, but in terms of our daily life. One kind of aspiration for me with this channel is to, I think you can think of it as finding things that give refuge, sort of extending the concept of refuge to include music, or poetry, art, recognizing that in our lives there are artifacts, there are pieces of music, books that don't just bring us pleasure, but actually fill in some of the spaces. So, what is refuge? Well, the formal chant, the Buddha, which is our shared capacity for enlightenment, right? The undying Buddha nature that resides within all of us, no matter how obscured, right? The Buddha. So we take refuge in the fact that equanimity, peace, freedom from suffering, enlightenment, those are within our capability. Every one of us, me, you, we all share that capacity. The Buddha nature. Dharma are the teachings, the practices that were included in the original teachings of the Buddha, and the commentary that has grown up around it, including into our own time. And what I would suggest is that, so for me, the symphonies of Gustav Mahler are part of the Dharma, because they teach me experientially some aspect of my mind, some aspect of what it is to be human. And that's what I think the Dharma ultimately is. It is a guide, a representation, a support that shows me how to live today in a way that I can die without regret. So for me, those symphonies, the music of Gustav Mahler, fill in some of those spaces that would otherwise be consumed with anxiety, beyond words. For you, those symphonies may leave you cold. They may sound like movie music in a pejorative sense. Movie music is wonderful, but it may sound entertainment rather than enlightenment. So again, part of what we're trying to do here in this channel is broaden out that potential source of Dharma as refuge, right? So Buddha, Dharma, and then Sangha, the community of practitioners, the people that support you, the people that inspire you, the people that practice with you, your Dharma friends, the community within the temple that you might practice in. This group Here, uh, me, we are colleagues, we are friends, we are parallel practitioners. And in many times, in many cases, it is simply knowing that there are others struggling, wrestling, appreciating, learning, growing in the same way. That can also fill in some of those gaps that otherwise might be filled with doubt or confusion or negative thoughts, unwholesome thoughts. As simple as this sounds, the number of times that I have withheld from doing something because the imagination of telling one of my Sangha community members that I had behaved in a certain way, uh, I don't want to do that, no matter what it is, how trivial or how serious. Uh, all of these teachings have a very real, like, microscopic reality to them. That, yeah, there are different ways of behaving that have different outcomes. And so we cultivate those. And the refuge, taking refuge in these three, can show us experientially what that is. And when I say that, I mean when we practice the refuge chant, the prayer, we can visualize all three of those. We can visualize the Buddha, we can visualize the teachings, we can visualize the community. And in that visualization, we can, for that moment, within that practice, kind of experience something that might not be available to us immediately in our day-to-day life. So refuge is a support in the sense that where there is doubt or confusion or the potential for unskillful action, we can take refuge in the teachings and be guided differently. When we study meditation, whatever form of meditation it is, whether it's concentration practice or calm abiding, big sky awareness, 86,000 forms of meditation. But all of them can be derailed by remorse, by attachment to regret from what my behavior was previously. And the easy way to avoid that is to control that. I can look back even within the last 36 hours on things that I wish I hadn't done. They weren't terrible. No one got hurt. But they were unskillful. I responded to my thoughts in a way that didn't cultivate kindness to myself, to people around me. Again, perhaps even the people around me wouldn't have noticed these. Sometimes they're obvious. But I can lie to myself. I can cheat myself. I can be lazy. Laziness is different from taking rest, which we all need as well. But there's a line. Again, these sound like pejorative, prescriptive. Thou shalt not. That isn't the case. The reality is that our behavior in the moment shapes the behavior in the next moment through the laws of cause and effect. So refuge is, the prayer is experiential, but it is educational as well, because within the chants, within the prayers are the teachings. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, the causal seeds of suffering. The aspiration that is held within the refuge. The refuge prayer that we do in my temple starts like this. Together with all sentient beings, I take refuge in the great teachers, my lineage, right? My teachers. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the community of all compassionate beings, the Sangha. I take refuge in the protectors of wisdom. I take refuge in the protectors of Dharma. So that protectors of wisdom and Dharma, refuge is also an arma, right? A preparation. Like when I begin my morning meditation with the refuge and kind of the parallel chant that we're not talking about today, but the generating of heart and mind of compassion. I've sort of situated myself as a practitioner. It's a bit like ChatGPT, right? It's a bit like AI. You define the persona. Hey, ChatGPT. If I ask a question, it'll make up some bullshit. But if I say, you are a practitioner well-versed in the Buddha Dharma. You are a practitioner who has read carefully all of the works of Joseph Goldstein. From there, answer this question. And you get a different response. Our minds are pliable. The first text of the Dhammapada, the mind follows what puts in. That's why social media is so terrible. I know I see this, and it's an area that I'm very weak in, because that algorithm fills the spaces often before refuge can get in there. It sounds more of a struggle, more of a battle than I intend it to be. It's more like, when water flows, if there are rocks and pebbles, the water flows. The water is shaped by the banks of the river. We are the river, and we get to define some of these things. And so refuge allows us to define that, right? It's experiential, it's educational, and it's a protector. It's protection. So we take refuge so that we can move out and with wisdom and compassion respond from this very stable position within the practice, within the refuge. There's never a point where refuge becomes unnecessary. In the church practice, which is part of the tantric practices, we take refuge not in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but in the open natural state of sort of general awareness. But we're still taking refuge because it's sort of settling into our understanding. Okay, so what if you're not a Buddhist? Okay, well, if you're not a Buddhist, whatever that means, we get to create our own refuge. I mentioned Mahler. On my desk, in front of me there, I have half a dozen books that I can pull at any point. I have the poetry of Philip Larkin. I have a collection of Stoic writings, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca. I have some textbooks around for the French language because I'm trying to learn French. And I have a book on Olivier Messiaen, some music theory. These are things that when my attitude is collapsing, as it does for all of us, as we move through the day, instead of choosing something unwholesome, for many years I took refuge in alcohol. And that's exactly what I did. When I was confused or tired, or let's face it, at any point, I turned to alcohol, which filled that space with its own energy. And I'm at a point where I still need an alternative. But reading a poem by Philip Larkin is very different from pouring a glass of bourbon. Both are taking refuge. One cultivates sort of thoughtful introspection, and one cultivates sort of a profusion of a different kind of energy. And I'll let you think through which one might be which. So we all find refuge, whether we're thinking about it or not. And part of this channel is to recognize the things that fill in those gaps in a way that brings peace at the end of the day, and which are the things that fill in those gaps that might feel like the right thing at the time, but ultimately swerve off and don't bring us peace and do fill us with remorse. And they don't have to be things like drugs and alcohol and profligate fornication. All of those sound great. And they are great. But different from taking refuge, yeah? We approach, if we can, alcohol and drugs, sex, exercise, approach them with a clear, stable point of view. And refuge allows us to cultivate that. I mean, we can think of the meditative pose when we sit cross-legged and our hands are upright, breathing. But that body is a refuge for the mind seeking to practice meditation. So cultivate refuge. I mentioned studying French. Well, it's different from, it's not meditative. I'm not saying that studying a language is the same as meditating. It's not. But it is something that clicks something in my brain that is wholesome and skillful. For you, it might feel like a chore and a burden and a punishment. If you were to take a Lego set and give it to me and say, here, this is very peaceful and calming to put this Lego set together, I would almost rather eat the Lego than try to put it together, because that kind of work is really contrary to my nature. It's good practice, but it would be a task. I mean, maybe at the end of it, it's a wholesome task, but it doesn't bring relief to me. I would need to seek refuge so that I could put together a Lego set. But I bet many of you would love to spend 48 hours nonstop putting together a big Lego thing. I'm trying to think of other examples. I find it quite peaceful to learn calligraphy. I'm not very good at calligraphy because the same things that make me a bad Lego person make me a bad calligrapher. I'm very sloppy. I'm not very attention to detail. But I love the feeling of pen on paper. What else? Music for me. When I play piano, it is nothing but like sort of golden light filling my synapses. It's a great gift to be able to experience that, entirely separate from how I'm playing, how well I'm playing, how much other people might enjoy it. That's not what's going on here. It's the act, right? Find these things that fuel yourself and then take refuge in them and honor that. Do it every day. Keep track of that you've done it. I do. I keep track, because even for everything that I'm saying, there can be days go by when I sort of fall back into mindless scrolling on social media or sort of other brainless stupefaction that are so readily available to us. And there's no way then to meditate or be mindful, or to pay attention, or to scrutinize the nature of thought. Any of the other meditative practices, those are all unavailable if my brain is sort of clogged up with these distractions. So find the line between what's a distraction and what's a cultivated experience. And let's talk about what they are, because I talk about the things that do it for me. And there may be a chance that that particular piece, poem, artifact, does it for you. But probably not. But what I'm hoping is the relationship I have with that poetry, with that music, rings a bell, and you have something that you have the same kind of connection with. That's refuge. That's refuge in the formal context of practice, and it's refuge in our ability to move sort of with integrity through our life, through my life, through your life. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you have a list of whatever that brings you that sense of refuge. Right? Could well be things that I've mentioned as distractions for me, because we're all wired differently. But it's the feeling of the filling in the spaces that counts. Yeah. Anyway, good. Keep your wits about you, and I'll talk to you soon.